years, we are much higher than where we've been. We've got some real hard workers putting in some overtime to make up for the positions that aren't being filled. In the next section, under employee benefits, again, I want to call your attention to the CERS, the account 0232, our retirement is up considerably from prior years. That 12% that the state has promised us.
Yes.
All right, if you turn the page, you can see we've got these accounts 0299C and K, and these are for our bonus payouts. 2 years ago, we spent $2 million on bonuses, and this year, total with fringes is $3 million. In the next section, you can see professional and technical services. So we are heading back into that time period where last year we got a Fund 2 grant for SEEK money, and so we pulled a bunch of expenses out. So I included with your report this time on page 18 those general fund costs that were pulled out of general fund and put into Fund 2. So we do not have a $700,000 increase in this expense. It's just that in last fiscal year, those were pulled to Fund 2. So we continue to see that in some other places as well. The next section, property services, we continue to see water higher than in prior years. If we go to page 9, you can again see that at the top of that page, those insurances, we pulled those costs out to Fund 2, and so we're not seeing a $500,000 increase in our expenses. As we go down further, you're going to see electricity is still very high year to date. Supplies in technology are high, and that's primarily in software, but we're also seeing some in these interactive panels, which is part of the budget. They're making up for lost time right there, so they are within budget on that. When we go to property, you can see we're over prior years in budget. We have had to make some additional purchases there. And on the final page of that, you can see the grand totals. And so our last year expenses, we've got them listed at $34.8 million. If you add the 2.1 that went to Fund 2, that gets us at 36.9. And if we take out our bonus for this year, it shows us at $1.2 million over prior year. As we turn to the next page for the functional expenses, I wanted to call your attention to this line in the middle, 2311, board activities. You have not gone hog wild this year. That again is that Fund 2 pulling money out. We've got tax collection fees that are not in there in fiscal 21, and the insurance is not in there. That's generally considered a board expense, so that is not a problem area. On the following page at the top, you can see debt service. So this was a payment for our KISTA buses at $8,000. Page 18 gives you a list of those expenses that were pulled out last year that distort any kind of variance analysis that you might do this year. Page 19, we've got our summary of bonding potential. There's no change there. Page 20, we've got our balance sheets by fund. And I do want to call attention to the change that you can see in cash on this first page. We got a reduction of $25 million on the first line, and then the investment line is showing the $20 million, which is part of what I showed you on that first page for investments. On page 35, we have the income statements by fund, and that concludes the treasurer's report.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Let me ask if board members have any questions on the treasurer's report. So may I get a motion to approve the treasurer's report? Motion made by Mr. Dodson and seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor, and that's 5-0. Ms. Anderson, will you walk us through bills and claims, please?
Yes, on page 93, we begin our bills and claims, and this is the list of invoices paid since we last met. So that is a considerable time period, and the number of invoices and the dollar amounts are definitely up. This does include payroll, so this $11 million includes the stipends for vaccine, the daycare, and the staff fringe benefit bonus. And then following that are all the detail invoices with comments. And that concludes bills and claims.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions or comments? Motion to approve bills and claims, please. Made by Mr. Kehoe and seconded by Ms. Hundley. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you.
Board members, we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first are from December 13th, 2021, the regular board meeting. Any corrections or additions? Motion to approve, please. Made by Mr. Kehoe, seconded by Mr. Dodson. All those in favor, and that would be 4 with 1 abstention. January 10th, 2022 was a work session. Corrections, additions, motion to approve, please. Made by Mr. Kehoe and seconded by Ms. Hundley. All those in favor, and that's 5-0. Thank you, guys. Superintendent, we are ready for your notice to the Board of Personnel Actions, sir.
Yes, just to recommend or draw attention to the board to review the personnel actions as presented.
Any comments, board members? All right, thank you, sir. And we are ready to approve the consent agenda, and we have items A through H. Your recommendation, sir?
Recommend to approve.
Motion to approve, made by Ms. Nykirk, seconded by Mr. Dodson. And at this point, can I ask if there are any questions or comments? Mr. Kehoe.
Just got a question. I guess item number B1, the field house. I saw there's another change order that came through. Could you give a reference about the sidewalk? Was it just not caught in the design, or? This is like the 5th change order on that project.
It wasn't intended to be removed. Once we were rerouting the wiring for the field lighting, the conduit was exposed in places and located in the walk that was adjacent to the exterior on the north side of the building. So it was a design decision to go ahead and replace that walk because it was exposing a crack through the walk from base where the line of the conduit was coming out of the building. So no, it was not in the original scope of work. It was not intended to be removed. After reviewing it, I decided that we would want to go ahead and replace that while we were doing concrete work on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That answer your question, Mr. Kehoe. Thank you, Mr. Bohannon. So you heard the motion in a second. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Thank you, everybody. Superintendent, we're ready for report number 1, sir.
Sure, I'd like to invite Ms. Anderson to come forward and share the draft FY23 budget.
Welcome back.
Long time no see. All right, so we have the draft budget here. The Kentucky Department of Education requires each local board of education to prepare and review a draft budget. This does not include any multi-year funds for the next fiscal year. So we are already beginning thinking about next year, no later than January 31st. So that falls at this board meeting. The draft budget is prepared mainly for compliance purposes and provides budget information based on current year operations. And so this is really just the beginning point. None of these numbers are in concrete by any stretch of the imagination. It does reflect revenues exclusive of on-behalf revenue of $105.5 million and expenses of $92.2 million and a contingency at 13.3 or 13.3 million or 13.8 percentage. Let's see, the changes that we're looking at, starting to talk about, of course, we'll be reviewing revenue based on information that we receive once we get property assessments. We are eagerly awaiting the state to finalize its budget, as that will play into a lot of what we can do. We are talking about merit type increases and what that would look like, so we're doing some analysis on that, and you can see 1% is going to be about 2.5 million and 2% is 3.5. Right now, and we anticipate this to be the case, the CERS employer contribution that's been going up 12% the last several years is going to be flat. There's a slight decrease, but it's really too minuscule to even count. So
That's a
we're
gift.
hoping that will stay as a flat rate. Some of the carry-forward costs that are more expensive are the IT infrastructure and our interactive classroom upgrades, each at $800,000. We are also thinking about how next year might look a little different than this year. So we're looking to see if there are any additional student interventions needed due to learning losses and any other losses during COVID. We will continue to look at the salary schedules for certified and classified staff that we began 3 years ago. We haven't completely finalized all of that. And we do want to include some campus beautification projects. So the numbers below do consider buses. We're looking at $840,000 this year for 7 of those, and we continue to anticipate some HVAC upgrades. The numbers below show the dollars for each of the budget pieces by fund, and again, this does not include any of the multi-year fund. This is just the annual funds. So the recommendation is to review the budget, knowing that we will continue to revise as we get additional information, and then the detailed budget follows.
Thank you. Questions or comments at this time, board members? We appreciate all the work that has gone into the budget to this point. Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you.
Superintendent, we are ready for report number 2, sir.
Yes, so I just draw the board's attention to what's in your packet, just to discuss proposed or possible board meeting schedule looking ahead to the new year, just for discussion as presented in your packet.
Any questions or comments at this time? All right, thank you, sir. Superintendent, report number 3.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Deves to come forward and share with the board about the report on emergency connectivity fund that we have, opportunity that the school district has.
Yes. Welcome, Mr. Deves.
Thank you. Trey Greenwell couldn't be here tonight, so I'm going to try to do his part, and we'll see where we're at with that, and hopefully don't ask too many questions. So basically, out of the COVID, federal government has created another source of some revenue for schools, 7.171 billion emergency connectivity funds. And basically what it is it's an opportunity that we have to help offset some technology costs. What we are asking for tonight is we're asking for approval to go ahead and file all the paperwork with our company, AdTech, who is our E-rate provider and E-rate consultant. And by filing that, it'll allow us to, number one, go ahead and try to get reimbursed for hotspots that we've already purchased in the amount of $65,000 and some change. And then there's another decision we can decide to make or not make. We don't have to, but it would allow us, if we decide to move forward, we need to do some research and come back to it, to buy Chromebooks in the amount of about $868,000 to get more Chromebooks and help replenish some that we have that are getting ready to fade out. And this is really to make a connection from people who have trouble doing homework at home with technology. So students would have to use some of this technology at home. It's not to just create a one-to-one environment. So
Yes.
by later tonight when you take action, it's to file the paperwork, and then we'll move forward with the hotspot reimbursement, and then we'll come back in February and decide if we want to go with Chromebooks or not. If we don't, then we've already at least done the paperwork, but we felt like if we waited too long and didn't fill out the E-rate paperwork, by the time you got that filled out and approved, then we're pushed it 2 months down the road, and you might not get device if we decide to go that way for the start of the school year.
Right. Questions or comments at this time? Ms. Nykerk?
So Mr. Deves, what kind of stipulations do we have if we take this money? I mean, I
Yeah.
read a couple of things about,
Yeah, the stipulation is you have to, number one, it's for kids to be able to help the homework gap with technology. So that's number one. They have to use some of it at home. And then from there, it really starts to fall back. And there's a lot of breadth to that. That's why we want to investigate the bigger purchase of the Chromebooks and not bring that to you tonight. We've talked one-to-one in the future, or in the past, and because if you buy all these devices, like anything else we've done with Intelligent Classroom and where else, if you put $800,000 into it now, you're going to have to replenish that $800,000 4 or 5 years down the road. somehow. So we want to be able to have a plan. We don't want to put it there and not be able to sustain it on that piece of it.
How long does this last? Like, if we...
You only have until the end of June. I believe it was, let me make sure. We have from July 1 of 2021 to June 30th of 2022. So we only have till June to spend it. If we don't do it by June, then we're out to go with the Chromebooks.
Okay. So there's no other, like, stipulations where, okay,
Not that I'm aware of.
okay. All right.
So, and we can dig deeper when we decide to bring back a plan if we want to for Chromebooks. We've
Is
already
it,
purchased the hotspots though, previously.
this would be a reimbursement,
Yes.
it looks like. And Mr. Deves, so I understand this would allow us to buy one Chromebook per student?
Up to $400. But that would not cover every student we have in the district on that piece of it. So that's where we have to decide. Chromebook costs are between $200 and $300. You can buy some different setups for it, so you can get what's called the white glove. So it's delivered to you ready to go, which will help with one of the issues we have if we go one-to-one is our infrastructure, human capital isn't huge. So being able to use some of those funds to pay for that would help on the human capital side of getting them out. But then we also need the human capital side of how we're going to use them most efficiently in the classroom and with schools. So it could be a bridge for some. You know, quite a few of our students do have devices already. So it could be a combination of that. We could also find some other resources and ways that we talked about in previous meetings with the one-to-one initiative.
Yes, on the surface, it sounds good. I know a lot of our schools have Chromebooks, and the life expectancy of those Chromebooks is usually about 40
Three to
years.
4 is good, 5 is stretching it. And we know that we're going to have about 5,000 Chromebooks that are going to be coming off the network or coming to end of life the next year and a half.
So
So that's what we got to look at.
this is going to be a serious need in this district, and this is a grant. Why wouldn't we take advantage of the opportunity?
Yeah, I think we need to do some research on the grant piece of the Chromebook and bring it back, because everything has a cost to it on the road.
Other questions, board members? So it's a superintendent report.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
will take action later.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Deves. Dr. Radford, we're ready for superintendent report number 4, sir.
Sure, I'd like to invite Dr. Smith and Mr. Gravis to come and share with the board about the teacher residency program and specifically job description.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As I came a couple weeks ago with Dr. Stephanie Wooten-Burnett from U of L, we talked about the opportunity to take part in the OVEC teacher residency program. U of L has partnered with Jefferson County Public Schools and has implemented it this year, and they are wanting to expand the program into OVEC. And Dr. Wooten-Burnett kind of gave you an overview of what the program would look like. And just as a quick reminder, I'm sure if this is working. Yeah, okay. I got it. It's on. It's just not working. There we go. All right. That the program allows for to create opportunities for people with college degrees that are interested in getting into the certified teaching field to take part in a 12-month program where they will take classes throughout the year, but also work for us during that school year with a focus on getting teachers in our critical need areas, such as math, science, and special education. It's also going to look at, they will help recruit teachers into the program, but some of the work that we've already done in talking to principals is that there's a lot of our classified staff already that are very interested, that have degrees, that would be interested in joining this program. So we could get some of our own teachers potentially, or some of our own staff into becoming teachers through this program. So with that one thing on there again, the focus is on the critical needs that we are struggling, like every school district in the United States, with finding teachers, as the teacher shortage is very real and not immune or not alone for Oldham County. So one of the next steps that we have to consider in taking as we go down this path of potentially joining in the OVEC residency program is we have to create a job description because during that 12-month period, the teacher or the person, the resident, will be working for us, like I said. And so what I have for you all tonight is to look at and consider is a job description for that teacher resident and what their qualifications and responsibilities are going to be during that school year. And while they're doing that again in the fall, they'll be working with their mentor teacher in their classroom in the content area that they're looking to get certified in while they take classes. And in the spring, they'll be student teaching with us. But this sets up the job description, because if we want to go forward and offer and look at this program, we're going to have the infrastructure in place for these people, these potential candidates, to have a position as we move forward. So, questions?
What's the timeline on that, Mr. Davis? We would need to pull the trigger to implement this program.
U of L would like to start recruiting and like to get hear from the people that we have that are interested very soon, within the next month. January, February is when they'd like to start. Again, we will be a part of all the interview process and looking at all the teachers or all the candidates that are interested in the teacher program, and we will have a say in who gets in. No one's going to get in, be given a position without our approval that we feel like they fit what we're looking for with Oldham County Schools.
Yes, I appreciate that. Let me just ask, we heard this initial report 2 weeks ago at our work session from Dr. Wooten Burnett, and I appreciate the follow-up, Mr. Davis. Let me ask if board members have any questions or concerns.
I got one question.
Mr. Dodson.
Now, these candidates or teachers, they will be teaching our curriculum.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And in the time that they're with us too, like in the fall, they will just be like a teacher assistant. They'll be working with kind of doing what normal teacher candidates do now. They'll be sitting there as like doing observation hours, working with the teacher and being a second adult in the room, learning the craft of the trade. And then in the spring, like I said, they will be a student teacher with that mentor teacher, doing the same thing any student teacher would do any time that they're with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gravis. You want to add to, Superintendent?
Yes, and Mr. Gravis, would you say that this is an opportunity in large in part for our district to grow our own using the certification process that U of L has at their fingertips, because they are a certifying educational program and entity?
Right, absolutely. Like I said, when we initially were made aware of this potential opportunity, we talked to principals, and we already have, I would say, 12, 13, responses from principals of people like, hey, this person in my building is an aide or does something else and has a degree and is always talked about wanting to get into education, but because of whatever financial circumstances or where they are in their life, it's just really difficult. This will allow them to continue working with a paid position while going back to school and getting that degree. And then, long-term, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, they'll be signing a contract that will commit them to 4 years working for Oldham County.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Hundley?
Is this the same slideshow from last time?
Yeah, I just pulled a couple of the slides.
Okay. I'm still concerned about the slide that specifically stated DEI curriculum. And when I asked the question last time, it was just for recruiting, but that is in direct conflict of what the slide said.
Which one? This slide or?
I don't,
Oh, because like I said, I didn't.
We never
Other
got
than
them.
highlighting.
we never got those slides. I never got them. Did
Okay.
anybody else?
No.
Okay.
No.
We'll
But
get
one of
email
the
to you.
slides specifically stated that they would have a DEI curriculum that they would be using to integrate with teachings. And so I just want to know what that is,
Okay.
because when I asked, it was said it was just about recruiting, but that is not what the slide said.
All I know is that the curriculum or the courses that they're going to take are within the course catalog at U of L, and you can look at those, and there's no mention of DEI or CRT or anything like that in the course, in those courses. And then in terms of the courses that we teach in the summer, we develop along with the other OVEC school systems. So Shelby and Franklin are the other schools that are, school districts that are pursuing this right now. So that's all I can ask more clarification from Dr. Wooten Burnett for you.
Yeah, I would like more clarification because the slide specifically said DEI curriculum.
Other questions or comments? Superintendent?
So I really appreciate that question, Ms. Huntley. I think what I would share with the board is what has been shared with me is what U of L has said or stated is their full intention is if any district, because it's not just Oldham County, it's the other districts within our region have this access and opportunity, is that should any district have struggle with identifying candidates, they would really try to identify candidates that represent the students and families in which they serve. As Mr. Gravis has shared, talking with our principals, is that we have identified several candidates within our district who already work for us and hold near and dear what's important within Oldham County, which is why I feel comfortable being able to share this with the board at this time. However, I do understand the concerns that have been presented. The other thing is that the University of Louisville, we accept something just for consideration. We accept candidates who have gone through a certification process within education programs at University of Louisville, and we hire those candidates. So it's just something to consider. I certainly understand and appreciate the question, but however, that is the response I got from University of Louisville regarding that aspect. Now, I do think that they have had conversations with other districts, larger districts, who might want to go down perhaps a different pathway, but because of where we are with our numbers and by gauging the interest, I think that's something that, and we have certainly a large oversight with what happens. And Mr. Gravis, could you just maybe touch on the day-to-day kind of oversight and work that these candidates would have with a mentor, the experiences, just touch on that for a moment?
Right, like I said earlier, that they're going to be working, especially in the fall, they're going to be with that mentor teacher the entire time. They're with them in their classroom the entire time. In the spring, they will be student teaching, and it'll be a little bit different, I guess, than normal student teachers where you go into a brand new classroom and there's a little bit of gradual release from working with that teacher and getting to know your students, where they've already would have been working with those kids since August. So it might be a little bit quicker transition over to the candidate taking on the full teaching responsibility, but they're responsible for teaching the curriculum laid out that's for that course or that classroom.
Thank you, Superintendent and Mr. Gravis. Any other questions or comments? We will take a look at this a little bit later during action items. Thank you, Mr. Gravis. Superintendent, report number 5, sir.
Yes, I'd like to invite Mr. Dees to come forward and share with the board an update on COVID-19 within our school district.
Welcome back, Mr. Deves.
All right. So once again, we've updated some slides just to kind of give you the perspective of where we are as of January 24th, 2022. So as of today, we had 67 positive preschool and elementary students for a 1.23 positivity rate, 48 middle school and 27 high school, and 142 total, which is improving for us for a 1.14% of students positive on that. If you go back to the week of the 17th to the 21st, we did have an increase from the previous time we met to 125 cases per day in all the schools on that. So hopefully we'll start to see that. It's trending well today for the week of the 24th. Here's our graph that we show you just to look at it graphically. You can see the increase, and hopefully that'll be our top point moving forward. So this is the sheet that was given to us 3 minutes or 4 minutes before our last meeting that we had to go out and get copies and bring back. We just want to share that we could not put that up last time because of the timing of it. But basically here's the scenario that we were presented last time and that kind of changed what we talked about. With schools with universal masking, you can isolate individuals who test positive for only 5 days compared to last time. Without masking, it would be isolating individuals who test positive for 5 days. No contact tracing would happen. If they're masked, if you're unmasked, contact tracing would be followed at the school exposure and close contacts. No quarantine would be needed for schools if it's masked, and then we'd have to, if we weren't masked, we'd have to quarantine individuals who are not up to date with their COVID vaccine for exposure at school for at least 5 days, unless a test to stay program was in, and then quarantine individuals not up to date with COVID-19 and who are exposed at home would be at least 5 days unless participating in test to stay and on the same. So that was a slide that came out right before our last meeting that we wanted to put back out there for you today, which just changed a little bit of the understanding. Prior to the new guidelines, we had positive staff and students required to miss 10 days of work. It required 10 days of quarantine for students and staff from in-school exposures. An average number of students on quarantine prior to January 11th was 321 per day. That's a combination of out-of-school exposures and in-school exposures. Oldham County staff completed contact tracing for all positive cases, and parents required to pick students up as notified and as they could get there. Probably the biggest one on that is just the burdensome effort of trying to contact trace in the school. After the guidelines and with the masking mandate that we did have in place, positive staff and students isolate for 5 days. No required quarantines of students and staff from in-school exposures. So as of 1/24, we only had 138 students on quarantine, and all of those are from out-of-school exposures. So somewhere in the household or out in the community, that's 183 fewer students on quarantine than the previous average. And then it just takes a huge burden off of our health staff in the schools, and teachers have had to be asked who's sitting where on that piece. And then no students are required to leave school after the in-school exposure. So that's just kind of the before and after of the previous slide to kind of see and just put some numbers of where it meant for us on that piece of it. So if we go to our graph of just quarantines, of active, of total quarantines and quarantines school-related, you can see the school-related really have just dropped to zero because we don't have to do that right now on that piece. And the other ones have come down drastically too. So here's our chart we always go back to and look at the numbers. So the week of January 17th, which was last week, in between meetings, our state positivity rate rose to 30.25. Our OC incident rate went from 191 to 241. School cases on a week, on a daily average, went from 27 to 93. And then the vaccinations did go up a little bit. We did add a new column for the last 2 weeks. Percent of 5 to 11 who are vaccinated has stayed at 26. And then ICU actually went down from January 10th to the 17th. And then if you look for the week of January 24th, there's where we're at now, of 32.1, 276.1, 125. And then the ICU has gone down again as of putting it up this morning. So still numbers, kind of are a little bit different on this one, with the ICU going down and the other ones going up. So somebody asked, hey, could we take the first two, or the second and third column, the state positivity rate and the OC incident rate, and put them in a graphical form as well, like we did with the other ones. So we have done that. So this is the Kentucky positivity rate from August 8th up to where today. And then this is the Oldham County incident rate along that same time frame. So that's basically this chart, columns 2 and 3, put into a graphical form that we were asked to do. So if you look at school by school, student positivity percentages, preschool's 0 right now. The elementaries are pretty good. We have one that's over 2, but we've gotten some up to almost 4. Middle schools, we have 1 over 2, and then our high schools, none of them are over 1. So trending in the right direction on those as well. When we first started this, and I first came out, we talked about test to stay and what we were trying to do. Our number one goal was in-person instruction. And we've been able to have in-person instruction every day this year. We just wanted to show an impact of districts around us who have or are currently have used NTI, and now could also go NTI or remote learning with the change in the legislature this past couple of weeks to give them a total of 20 days, depending on how they want to use them. But these are just a few of some counties that we kind of compare ourselves to and ask, what are they doing, what are we doing, what are the trends? And we're happy to say that we've been in school every day with kids in butts and seats. So I think that's a positive win for us and our community. And that's it. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Deves. Let me ask, board members, do you have any questions or comments? Need to see any of the data again. Mr. Kehoe.
Our teacher rates, where are we at the most right now? The high schools, the middle schools?
When you say teacher rates
with
of positive.
COVID being out.
It's pretty consistent by school size. We've had a couple tough days at some elementary schools, a couple at high school. So I can't just sit there and say there's one grade level.
I know last week there was some concern that we may have to, take other measures because of the teacher rate.
Yeah. So we took some other measures. Our principals did an awesome job and stepped up. And principals were in classrooms, counselors were in classrooms. Teachers worked their planning periods, worked their butt off for the last couple of weeks to keep it going. Even some central office staff went and covered some classrooms. We talked last week that we would cancel any meeting at the district level for the next 3 weeks and last week, and we could stop and deploy and go out if need be to try to keep that promise of in-person instruction. So I would say we've taken some measures, but I have to give the credit back to the schools and the principals and their teams of teachers and staff. We've also tweaked our rules a little bit more for classified staff covering. And then we're going to even look at some other ways to try to do that. And we've done the 10-day sub, which has been a great success at most schools because they're coming in and then they can move them on a dime during a time. But it's tough. It's wearing, but they are doing an awesome job.
Thank you, Mr. Deves. Ms. Hundley, I think you had a question.
Yeah, Dr. Radford, were you going to address the 0% that's on?
Yes, so as Mr. Deves talked about since adopting the most recent Kentucky Department of Public Health guidelines, we do not quarantine students or with in-school exposure. So when you look on our website, we update that daily. You will see, as you saw on that line graph, there are a lot zeros because we're not identifying or quarantining students as an example. So that's why we're reporting it that way because we're no longer, now there is a difference with what gets reported to us from the health department, such as what might happen in the community, but with what happens in school exposure, we're not quarantining because we're not contact tracing as a result of a positive case.
Okay, thank you.
Do you also want to talk about the asterisks at the bottom of the other one?
Yes.
So we've also received a couple calls about the test to stay and some questions on that. And so we've clarified, a lot of times you'll see in the last couple of weeks, we've had 200, 250, 480, almost 500 people at test to stay. And you see the number of positives. All those positives are not students. Because right now, if you have connection to your household to a student, you can get tested, staff can get tested. So we have adults that are getting tested, younger kids, older siblings, and so forth. Some are using it because they have to have a note to get back into their workplace. And until recently, we were the only place in the county you could get a rapid test and not have to wait 2 or 3 days. So people were going and using that test site to get their note of a rapid get back to work, and then some people were showing up positive. So it's not, when they see that those numbers don't match with what's up top, it's because they're not all students.
And the reason why, a couple of notes to make about that's important because Oldham County Schools, our school district does not pay for test to stay. It's paid for by the state through a grant the state has been given, and so that company is not we do not employ those folks. So as a result of adjusting our protocols from our last board meeting that Mr. Deves just went over, that's how test to stay has now been adapted to be able to service as many folks as we can within our community, as Mr. Deves just highlighted.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Deves. Excellent report. We have much to consider. Thank you, sir. We are ready, Superintendent, for recognitions, and I've asked Mr. Dodson to assist the superintendent
Okay.
for this portion of the meeting. No?
Stay right here. Okay, good evening. First, I'd like to recognize our school board members. As January is School Board Appreciation and Recognition Month, Kentucky observes School Board Recognition Month in January, and Oldham County Schools is proud to celebrate our dedicated board members. Joyce Fletcher, Larry Dodson, Suzanne Hunley, Patrick Kehoe, and Andrea Nykirk spend countless hours serving the students, families, and community members of Oldham County. Please join us in thanking them for their commitment to ensuring the highest levels of learning for our students. I'd like to ask each board member one at a time to come forward, and I have a small token of appreciation to share and give to you all, and I'd like to show you what that is. So the quick background on this is when I first started in Oldham County, back this up here a little bit so I can see everybody. When I started in Oldham County, Mr. Grimm, the assistant principal at North Oldham Middle School, sent me a plaque that the Innovation Lab students helped design and he helped create. So I thought it would be a nice gesture just to recognize and show appreciation to our board members. So I have one, Mr. Grimm and the students worked to design and help kind of create one for each board member. So I'd like for you to come forward and share this and give this to you, and then I'd like to take a group picture if we could. I'd like to recognize Ms. Joyce Fletcher, our board chair. I'd like to recognize Larry Dodson, our board vice chair. Mr. Patrick Kehoe. If you want to get right there, we'll get a picture here real quick. Ms. Suzanne Hunley, one of our other board members. Ms. Andrea Nykirk, one of our other board members, thank you. And if we want to line up right here, we'll get a picture of Ms. Webb or Ms. Peters, if we get a quick picture. If everyone's okay, we'll spread out and we'll maybe take our mask off just for a moment and get a quick picture as a board team. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Webb. Next, we have a few different
Oh,
groups that we'd
that's
like
sweet.
to recognize.
Put it towards me.
Next, I'd like to recognize our National Board Certified Teachers. Oldham County Schools is proud to announce that 5 teachers obtained their National Board Certification in December. National Board Certification recognizes accomplished teachers who work to generate continued improvement in the learning environment. This certification is a voluntary advanced teacher credential which can take several years to complete. It is a rigorous, peer-reviewed process that ensures teachers have proven skills to advance student achievement. As part of this process, teachers must analyze their teaching context and students' needs, demonstrate what they have done outside of the classroom to improve student success, submit videos of their teaching, and provide student work samples that demonstrate growth. Additionally, candidates must submit essays describing, analyzing, and reflecting on their practices and the evidence, and pass an exam to demonstrate they have mastered their chosen content area of certification. Just under 3% of the nation's teachers are nationally board certified. I'd like to recognize Paige Bachelador, Eliza Earhart, Brian Jackson, Leslie Nieport, and Lori Robinette. If you would, if those teachers are here, please come forward. If you would, please stay up, stand, and we'll get a quick picture if we could, please.
Superintendent, you need to join them. Leslie and Paige, this is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations.
Some of our teachers could not be here tonight. Just really like to re-emphasize what I've shared here and what our board members have also shared, and know that this is quite an accomplishment, and just really appreciate and recognize their hard work. Next, cross-country. Several Oldham County Schools teams competed and placed in the state cross-country meet at both the high school and middle school level this year. Oldham County High School's girls cross-country team wins third place at the state meet. The girls placed third. Oldham County High School has two of the three top finishers, and those are Tula Fabush finishing in second place for the girls, and Cannon Weaver finishing in third place for the boys. Keep going.
I don't believe we have those students with us this evening, Superintendent.
Yes,
do
ma'am,
we?
that's correct. So we have a long list of teams to recognize tonight, so they're not in attendance with us, but we all recognize them by a group here at the board meeting, and then we are also recognizing them individually at each school, and also using our social media platforms. We have a long list. Next is our North Oldham High School boys cross-country team wins the state title. The boys cross-country team from North Oldham High School is the 2021 state champions. North Oldham had two of the top three finishers in Jake Piles, second place, and Ethan Ransdell in third. Next, North Oldham Middle School boys and girls cross-country team win state title. Both the boys and girls cross-country teams from North Oldham Middle School came home as state champions this year. And girls team member Elle Cargold was the first place finisher. I hope I got her name correct.
I'm pretty sure you didn't.
I do apologize. I even practiced. East Oldham Middle School, boys 6th grade and under cross-country team takes state title. The 6th grade boys cross-country team from East Oldham Middle School came home with the middle school state championship title. In addition to cross-country, we want to celebrate the accomplishments of the South Oldham High School girls soccer team and the East Oldham Middle School cheer team, who both competed at the state championship level. South Oldham High School varsity soccer is the state runner-up. The South Oldham High School girls varsity soccer team competed in the state championship game and returned state runner-up. What a tremendous accomplishment. East Oldham Middle School cheer team won the state competition. The East Oldham Middle School cheer team competed in the state championships at the state cheer competition and won first place. This is the first time the East has won the state championship, and we're very proud of them. Please help me recognize all these teams and individuals for their tremendous accomplishments, and we're so very proud of each team and each individual. Just also like to make one last notation that we will be following up with each team and doing some further recognition for each team at each school. So thank you so much.
Correct. Thank you, Superintendent. We're ready for public expression. Mr. Williams? Do we have anybody wishing to address the board this evening? Thank you. So I'm going to ask the vice chair to read our policy governing public expression, please, Mr. Dodson.
Board will designate a portion of the meeting to hear public comment regarding areas of the board's jurisdiction. Persons wishing to speak shall sign in with the registrar and review the policy on making public comment. The board chairperson or designee will read aloud the public expression guidelines. Speakers should register by signing the sign-in sheet upon their arrival to the meeting. The board will call upon speakers in the order of which they are signed in. Speakers shall not exceed the time limit allotted by the board. The board will allot time based on the number of individuals registered to speak.
So we have 13 persons that are signed in to address the board. So what's the pleasure of the board?
3 minutes?
3 minutes?
Okay, we'll allow 3 minutes. Public criticism of individual staff members and individual board members is prohibited. Concerns about individual staff performance should be addressed with the staff member directly or his or her immediate supervisor or the board chairperson respectively. Public expression is not a question and answer period. Any question expressed by the speaker will be noted with directives for appropriate administration to follow up. The board, however, reserves the right to respond when appropriate or necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. So we're ready to begin. Dr. Molly Rutherford is the first speaker signed in. Welcome, Dr. Rutherford.
Thank you. I know you all from when I applied for the open position on the board, and I just want to thank you very much for not choosing me. I don't think that I realized at that time that you don't have any power and that there's a higher agenda here. I didn't bring data today because it's pointless. That's why I stopped attending these meetings. When I realize something is a waste of my time, I just devote less time to it. Within the past month, the CDC and the mainstream news have finally admitted that cloth masks don't stop the spread of SARS-CoV-2 and that vaccines don't stop transmission. Many people and pundits who supported the school closures have admitted in the past few weeks, maybe the past month, that they made a catastrophic mistake that harmed our kids. The evidence that this pandemic response did more damage than the virus itself is indisputable at this point. My goal today is to let everyone know I'm available as a physician practicing in Oldham County to help us move forward and heal our community, and most importantly, our kids. I have no hidden agenda. I don't want to run for office. I have a full patient panel. I have removed my youngest child from public schools, and my oldest child has a mask exemption. Do you mind if I ask people in the room how many people have recovered from COVID? If you're comfortable sharing? Okay. This new variant, Omicron, I'm not sure of the estimates in Oldham County, but you can ask Matt Rhodes. But in my practice, I'm seeing primarily Omicron. Maybe Omicron is an answered prayer. I know many of us have been praying for the end of this pandemic. The symptoms are less severe. It doesn't really go into the lungs. It's very contagious, but thankfully more people are doing fine with it, not needing hospitalization, not dying. Regardless of this relative decreased pathogenicity, we can't continue like this. We must find a way forward that stops harming our kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brandon White.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, grateful for the previous comments. As I stand before you, I'd be remiss if I didn't first thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and Dr. Radford, and everyone on the board. I don't know how you do it. So I know it's incredibly hard. I also want to thank the staff in the schools. I don't know how the teachers do it either. I feel like there's a tremendous burden that's been placed on them that they've had to endure as well. But I am grateful for the staff, for the board. And so I recognize this is not an easy discussion or decision that's being made as it relates to the masks. And I do believe that we can disagree and still be civil. Dr. Radford, you say in your videos often, and I'm grateful for those videos, by the way. So thank you for those. I do have to say, as I work with youth throughout the community, in sports and coaching and volunteering throughout the community, there are dramatic negative effects that I can see. I don't have the data, I'm not a doctor. But the psychological effects that are happening from something as simple as a mask it's having an effect. And so I'm not here with data to support that except for what I see. Young men and young women who are dealing with psychological damage and psychological impacts because they're not developing socially the way that they need to. They're not picking up on verbal cues that are given. There were a few articles that were out there that I read in preparation that I won't share due to time and trying to respect that. But it is very real, the social delay that's occurring. And I hope that is considered along with the transmission and all that you have to deal with. I am a father of 3 teenage boys. All 3 of them at one point or time from a staff had snide remarks and snide comments made. My oldest son was referred to as a terrorist because he had his mask below his nose. My youngest son in middle school said he didn't care about his teacher's family because he wasn't wearing his mask correctly. Once again, I can't imagine the stress these teachers are under, so I'm not here to complain about individuals. I respect their opinion and being able to express that. But the damage is being done to my boys, it's being done to the youth that are out there, and I hope that you consider that as we consider this mask mandate. If people would like to wear masks, allow them to wear masks, but please drop the mandate.
Mr. White's time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Michelle Elliott.
And thank you, Mr. White.
Michelle Elliott.
Good evening.
Hi there. I want to start off by thanking the staff and the teachers in the schools last week. What they did, what everyone did was amazing, jumping in like that. And I would expect nothing less from our teachers and staff at Oldham County. Each month I ask myself, what will I say when I'm given my 2 to 3 minutes, which I understand, the time frame. This has been the toughest month so far. You want to say something impactful, something sincere. You want to bring to light atrocities that you have seen. I feel in the past year, each month, I have said all those things. I've made my plight has not changed. I still stand for parent choice. I still disagree with the discrimination happening when it comes to kids who have gotten this shot and kids who haven't, and how they're treated when it comes to quarantine and such. So nothing has changed there. So there is only one thing that I feel that I was left with today, and that is prayer. So I'm going to say a prayer, a silent prayer, because not everyone feels the same way, but a prayer for strength and to see the light in this darkness. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Laura O'Brien.
Michelle, the separation between church and state does not prohibit us from praying. So thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
This is my first time up here, so I wanted to know if it's okay if I read a speech for somebody else. She wasn't able to be here, but she's a friend of mine, and she really felt like it was important for you all to hear this.
Sure.
So this is from my friend. My 13-year-old son was a victim of not only bullies, but also a depression that started in March of 2020. He has always felt different because he is. He has special needs, has ADHD, and has a sensory disorder. On December 13th, I received a call from the school to come and get him. He was angry and hitting walls and lockers. The week before, he had been continuously tormented by 4 boys everywhere they found him at school. All year long, he has been fighting off insults like the crippled kid and the Hulk. He was also bullied for not wearing a mask despite having a mask exemption. He had asked teachers numerous times for help, but very little was done. It wasn't until that Friday were the steps made to separate them. However, by then, he had already reached his limit. The following Monday, I found my son in his room from a drug overdose. Remember, he's 13. He had taken over 20 sleeping pills and was having severe side effects from it. He was hallucinating and was seeing and talking to things that weren't there. I immediately took him to the ER where his condition worsened. He had to be held down and given more drugs to calm him until they eventually had to put him to sleep. This process took hours because his body was rejecting the medicine to make him calm. It took 7 adults to hold him down to keep him from hurting himself. I watched helplessly as he foamed at the mouth and finally went limp. I thought I was going to lose him that day. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. My son was hospitalized for 14 days, and in those days, I didn't hear a single word from anyone at the school. I understand it was Christmas break, but depression doesn't end when the school bell rings. We needed support, but got none. Our mental health hospitals are overrun. I can't even get him therapy for 3 to 6 months. The true pandemic is the mental health crisis among our children, and Oldham County schools are not helping with it. You have to do better. Our kids' lives literally depend on it. This is a mom from Oldham County. This isn't somebody at JCPS. She's got a kid here, and he's 13 years old, and I have a 12-year-old, and I can't even imagine them going through that. Like, I couldn't even think about it. I have to hold back tears because the thought of just a young kid feeling so desperate from the bullies and the pressure of life that he would do something like this. I really think this needs to be addressed, and the mask issue and all of the things we're putting them through with the vax discrimination and the unnecessary quarantines are what's pushing them over the edge. So I just ask that you please consider this and unmask our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien.
Amy Wellborn.
Laura, I want to thank, I'm pleased to make a face connection with your name.
And actually, I'm sorry, I forgot. This is her story. She has her number on there if you'd like to contact her.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I also would like to thank you and the staff. We're all dealing with things in different ways, and I'm not attacking you personally when I read this, but there are things I think we all need to think about and adjust our focus. Good evening. Here we are again, same rodeo, same hamster wheel. Grumble, complain, submit to the unconstitutional mandates, and repeat. This is the problem we have as concerned citizens. We are all pawns in a larger scheme to bring this country's freedoms to its knees. I understand not everyone may agree with my view, yet I feel the need to share. As a parent, it is difficult to accept all the ways our children have been damaged during this 2-year event, over 3 school years, in fact. I believe it has purposely been heavily played out on the backs of families. This is where our faith and our freedoms are formed. I'm sure you realize how hypocritical it looks to us since the January 10th decision to remask our children. They wear a mask all day at school, but can then turn around and go to a cram-packed basketball game where no one is required to mask. Don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled that my high schooler has a few glimpses of normalcy at a sporting event, if nowhere else. We are seeing a game of control of our constitutional freedoms that is being played out at the expense of our children. There is more than contracting a weakening virus to consider here. The psychological damage, as you've just heard, to our children due to these ineffective masks, the flip-flopping of school policies, and the bullying of unvaccinated children is growing every day. As you have heard, there are growing statistics about the epidemic of youth suicides, surges in adolescent substance abuse, and symptoms. These are symptoms of the games being played out on our most precious commodity, our children. We are destroying them. The bottom line, we may lack peer-reviewed research on the effectiveness of these masks for our children and transmitting this virus. But the other effects of masking are going to be played out for many years. And I pray we are close to the end of this pandemic. Let us all consider that it has to be a deadly virus for our government to save us from. If it isn't that, it means that we were wrong. Being wrong costs our children. So instead of waking up and saying we are wrong and trying to fix it, they're going to double down because acknowledging the damage that has been done is too painful. It's called pride, and it's one of the 7 deadly sins for a good reason. Also, there's this to consider. By admitting we're wrong means consequences, and I truly believe there will be consequences. Under the 21 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 50, 23, and 24, it is illegal to coerce a citizen to participate in an experiment. And I will remind you that both current vaccine for the COVID virus and masks are under current EUA experimental devices.
Ms. Wilburn, your time's up.
This is the Nuremberg Code.
Linda Swalski, I'm sorry if I damaged that.
And thank you, Ms. Welborn.
How do you pronounce your last name?
Stasiowski. And this is my first time here. Thank you all for being here.
Welcome.
I was told 15 years ago when I had my daughter that I would need to be her voice. And so it took me this long to be her voice on this concern. I am a preschool teacher and a religious education teacher and a mom of a child with a severe learning disability. My concerns are the inconsistencies of the data and procedures and how masks affect learning. There's more to learning than just being physically in the building. In my classes, I've seen changes in children communicating less and in class and with each other, which is an important part of learning. They feel unseen, hidden, and just there. My daughter is in a separate ECS class with students having a large variety of disabilities. And then she's also integrated for a couple classes for socialization. Unfortunately, there's no point of that because there's no socializing, which is part of the learning process for her. In her other class, there are medically fragile students, and some of them are mask exempt, which is totally for good reason. I couldn't imagine making them do that. But due to that, she still needs to quarantine. Even though there's no close contact right now, she still needed to quarantine. She still needed to do test to stay. Her structure is messed up. Her routine is shattered. And she feels, again, different from everybody else. She has had to have been quarantined or test to stay 3 times. None of those times has she tested positive. It just seems like it's a really big strain for no reason. She is learning to read. She can't sound out her words efficiently or see her teachers form words. She gets frustrated. She feels inadequate. And there's really no reason to be there. I know these struggles exist for those with less severe issues and the general population as well. There's no universal fix like masks, and they are hurting many children. Even doctors and scientists don't agree. My dad's 87 years old, goes to a doctor's appointment, his doctor doesn't have a mask on. Like, doctors don't even agree on things. So there's no way that we can assume that this is an all-knowing world. I know people who support masks and then turn around and only wear it when it's convenient for them. And our kids don't have that option. We want it to be by choice. And I'm asking you to have an open mind and understand that the inconsistencies are there and to reconsider the mask mandate to benefit the learning environment.
Ma'am, your time's up.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Ms. Linda.
Kimberly
Get 2-minute break.
Sheehan?
After this one.
We'll break it.
Wait. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is also my first time up here. I have 2 kiddos that are in elementary school, and honestly, I just have a question for you guys. I'd just like to know why we're doing this to them. There's no comparative studies, there's no peer review studies that show that these masks work. And with all due respect, Ms. Fletcher, you even made a comment, a couple of times ago that there are no peer reviews that the masks do work. So why are we doing this? All of these people that are talking to you about the mental health, I'm a social worker, I see it every day. And it just needs to stop. I don't really have a lot of studies to give you, because what's the point at this point? But I do know that there are tons and tons of them that can show you that these masks, the cloth masks, are not working. If you could please, please stop the mask.
Thank you.
Lisa Paris.
Hi again, you guys,
Welcome.
and thank you for letting us speak to you. Dr. Radford, I don't know how you do it. I know that you're under a lot of pressure and that the KDE doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room on anything if you want to keep your career. And I don't know what I would do in your spot. Mortgages, car payments, I don't know. You guys are our elected people, and we rely on you to keep our kids safe. And while you're throwing around millions of dollars like manhole covers, nobody has even brought up anything about safety for the children. You're talking about spending $800 million on Chromebooks. Some of these kids should not have Chromebooks at home because they don't have buffers on their home Wi-Fi, and they will get into trouble, serious trouble, and some of them won't stop from getting into trouble. There's things in the school right now that are not safe for kids. I've brought you some examples so that you can look at them yourself. That'll break families in half and scar kids for generations, okay? And they're in our schools right now, and any one of you could make a motion to put a stop to it, and none of you do. The masks are the tip of the iceberg for safety for our kids. I've got a daughter, a beautiful daughter, who bought $37 worth of masks from Amazon all by herself. She works, she has her own money. And I'm like, why? We're not going to have masks for very much longer. I've got a handful of them. We don't need 3 boxes of masks. And she says, Mom, I like my face better when half of it is hidden. I've got a little boy who's been traumatized, who cannot read the room, who doesn't know when someone out of the blue is going to beat the crap out of him, and he can't read the facial expressions. And I've got another little boy who can't hear what people are saying because he's got a phonemic awareness problem. And when they have a mask, he can't hear them, he can't understand them, and he keeps getting an F and bouncing back to a D in algebra because he can't understand what's happening in the classroom. And he's a freshman. His grades matter for his college, for his career, for his future. And every day he comes home begging me to somehow teach him algebra and homeschool him, right? And they're all going to therapy once a week, and the receptionist is reminding me that parent notes don't work after 8, and so I went to the therapist to get more therapy notes because the kids haven't turned them all in, and I was amazed at how many therapy sessions my kids have had this year. I don't even know how many. I didn't have time to count them all. Okay, so when we're counting missed days for quarantine, let's count missed days for therapy and missed days because some kids just can't face going to school. and not seeing everybody and laughing and talking and being friends with each other and sitting with each other. So that's all I have to say, but thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Lisa.
Bridget Ely? Thank you.
Oh, gosh.
Welcome, Miss Ely.
Hi there. It's true that contact tracing is burdensome, but it's a burden that we can bear to protect our students. We've got to find a way to get around this. And this isn't just about breathing in bodily waste and dangerous bacteria, including E. coli, that I've talked to you about so many times. I found another study, and it's literally increasing the carbon dioxide level in the kids' blood. It's a slow poisoning of the children and the teachers and the staff. And yes, they work hard. They're amazing. They don't deserve to be medically injured, none of them. The key to remember is that mask-induced changes are relatively minor at first glance, so it's easy for us to ignore it. But repeated exposure over long periods is relevant and extremely dangerous. It is literally poisoning our children's blood. Yes, the carbon dioxide gets into their blood. These researchers say long-term carbon dioxide increases can cause heart and vein damage. It damages veins that supply blood to the brain. Now, this is a short part of this study written by neurologists and pathologists from top research facilities. I forwarded you the study. It's published in a peer-reviewed journal. It was chosen for inclusion on the U.S. government's NIH website. And the study says, long-term disease-relevant consequences of masks are to be expected. I mean, we could stop right there. Long-term disease-relevant consequences of masks are to be expected. So we know what's coming, and we can just ignore it, or we can accept it and find a way to get around this. Health-reducing changes in clinical pictures can develop, such as high blood pressure and arteriosclerosis, including coronary heart disease as well as neurological diseases. Now, this is me speaking. Neurological diseases can be horrific. I know it's kind of a technical word, but it means, numb hands, numb feet that never go away, shaking, and who knows, maybe we have some future artists or musicians that are little kids right now who are wearing masks every day, and they'll never be able to blossom and develop those amazing talents because their neurological systems have been damaged. I mean, we are really gambling here with this. And I will continue with the study. A similar effect with the stimulation of high blood pressure, cardiac dysfunction, and damage to blood vessels supplying the brain is suggested for slightly increased breathing rates over long periods. So they're having to breathe harder and faster to get that oxygen in, and the body is being attacked and it's responding. So they also say that masks do make anxiety disorders worse. These are top-level researchers, so they're confirming everything everybody's been saying here today. So it's imperative that we stop the masking mandates immediately. Now, if the KBE is making it difficult with their regulations, please consider alternatives. I mean, we can think outside the box. We talk about sticking together and being a team and caring. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Teresa Delon. Teresa Delon.
That's all right. Welcome back, Teresa.
Hey, I've been quiet for a while. Did we have the superintendent from Hardin County here?
The superintendent from Hardin County
Well, good. I was
was
gonna-
a special guest.
Okay, I spent the weekend with 3 of the kids from there, and just so they know, one little boy actually threw up in his mask at school, but, and none of the boys like it. They can't understand why they have to go to school in mask, but they don't have to do it anywhere else or no one else has to do it. They said the teachers get mask break. They can take their mask down while they talk, but they have to keep theirs up all day. So I was going to come to a school board meeting for them. I told them I would speak for them, and then the other older child that's special needs, she says, I can't take my mask down, I'll make my friends sick. I'm like, we are teaching these kids to live in fear. And that shouldn't be a mandate. That should be a choice whether you want your child or you yourself want to live in fear. And I have said from day one when I started these meetings coming, that we need to care about the psychological opponent to what we're doing to the kids. It's a lot harder to heal psychologically than it is from physically. And I dealt with both, so I know. And you just got to take it back to choice and let the parents decide what's best for their kids and figure out all this other stuff. But what we're doing to our kids, it's not the COVID that's hurting them. It's what the mandates and what the forced mandates are doing. These kids feel like they don't have a voice, they don't have power, their parents don't have the power, which is a big foundation for them, where they feel safe and where they feel like they have, they're losing that. You're taking it away from us. Grayson's no longer in public school, and he will not be until a lot of things change. It is tough homeschooling Grayson now, with the special needs and his temper, but I tell you what, we don't have to mess with all this COVID stuff. And it is so nice to get him into things to where he's free and he can, quote, be normal. It's a huge difference. And yes, he misses his school. We miss some of the teachers' expertise. But I stopped playing this game a long time ago, and I'm not going to play it. I'm done with it. And all parents can't do that, but there's got to be something. The number one, we have to take care of our kids. And I have stood here and batted for the kids' psychological aspects. And even now they're coming out, only N95 protects against this virulence. Guess what? If the cloth masks didn't work for this one, they didn't work for the other two. The N95s, when I mess with COVID patients, that's what I wore, the N95s. We can't have our kids in them. You can't breathe in those things, but just stop the mandates and make a choice. And let us decide.
Thank you, Teresa.
Chuck Ewing.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome, Mr. Ewing.
Pretty good. The bullying is not only happening between the kids, it's happening from the teachers to the kids, okay? They get ridiculed, they get called terrorists, they get cussed at from the teachers for not wearing a mask properly, okay? Then the other night I go to pick up my son from a basketball game. I go inside. Nobody's wearing masks. It's packed. You want to spread it? That's a prime example. So, but yet, if they wear their mask like this in class to get a break, they get called a terrorist. So, we got to do something because we're hurting these kids. So, there's going to be an outbreak from the basketball game the other night. What's more important, the sports or our kids' education and their livelihood? That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ewing.
Annabelle Springer.
If your time goes over, she can dig
No.
into mine. Did you shorten it? Oh, okay.
Welcome, Miss Annabelle.
Thank you. Dear board members, my name is Annabelle Springer. I am hearing impaired and I have been...
Annabelle, can you pull your mic down a little bit so the people out in the audience can hear you?
They're hearing impaired too, Annabelle. Most of them are about my age, Miss Annabelle.
I am hearing impaired and I have been since I was born because I have Pendred syndrome. Obviously, you can see how masks can be an issue. Unlike most here, I'm talking from the perspective of a person that has hearing loss rather than someone coming from a political or religious standpoint. Even people without hearing loss have struggled to communicate with masks on, so you can only imagine how much harder it would be for someone to understand people with only half their hearing. It takes twice the amount of energy to try to keep a conversation going for a few minutes, let alone attempt to comprehend the hard content being taught for 7 hours a day. While I'm too busy filling in the gaps to understand what someone is saying, I'm missing other crucial information. Although my mask exemption helps, it doesn't entirely resolve the situation. I'm still excluded from conversations at school because it gets exhausting for people to have to repeat everything at least 3 times. Often when it comes to a sickness, people worry about their physical health, which is understandable. People start to worry about the ones that are at high risk, so they speak for them and encourage others to wear masks. However, you have overlooked my needs as a student in this district. I feel that it's unreasonable to only look from one person's point of view instead of both. If you worry about a small percentage of the population, you should worry about the other part too. This summer, I found out my hearing loss had worsened. It started to worry me because I was starting school in a couple of weeks. I had no aid, harder classes, and more masks. Even with preparation, it still became too much. I was in the Louisville Ballet pre-professional program, and I had a job that I worked at every Friday. However, since it was too overwhelming playing this constant game of catch-up, I went on leave for work and I had to quit dancing entirely, despite the fact that I had danced for 12 years. I am not just speaking for myself, but also for the people that have hearing loss or any other disabilities that masks harm. Lifting the mandate can help create a more comfortable environment for deaf and hard of hearing people. Please don't leave us behind because you can't see our disabilities. I have a right to an education, and the policies you have set forth are harming me. As a child, disability or not, I shouldn't feel this much struggle because of the policies that fearful members of my school board set. Just because there's a pandemic going on does not give you or anyone the authority to harm a child's education. If an adult is okay to leave a few kids behind just to suppress their fear, they shouldn't be the ones in charge. We are always told to respect and obey adults, but we have also been told to say something when we see wrong. Once again, please don't leave us behind just because we have hidden disabilities.
Nice job, Miss Annabelle. Thank you.
Abby Springer.
Annabelle is my daughter. She did a great job. What she didn't have time to further explain was that dance was also her therapy and has been for many years, both physical and occupational. For a child with her disability, she should have possible balance and cognitive issues. Her art was also another form of communication since she's physically limited in other ways. She's exceptionally talented as a ball walker, aerial artist, and ballerina. She was accepted into the O.C. Gates program. Just somebody's texting me, just right before she was fast-tracked into the pre-pro program. That Louisville Ballet program was supposed to kind of catapult her to studio dancer. So I need you to understand the implication of her quitting. It wasn't just her quitting a hobby. It was her quitting a dream. I can't impress on you enough how bad it is that she doesn't have this anymore on multiple levels. It's a travesty. She almost broke herself trying to keep up, struggling in school when she has never struggled before. This was thrown into motion by an early quarantine that almost took the entire semester to come back from, the one that I begged you at the beginning of the year, days into school, to let her back into school. There have been other quarantines as well. You guys selectively choose what kids you choose to protect. My daughter's been called a bitch by other students and targeted by teachers in her school for not masking. On the first day of school, she was lectured by a teacher on why not masking kills people. Annabelle was the only one in her class not masked because it creates constant feedback on her devices that she wears in her ears. How do you think she has found the strength to face that daily? You're not equally protecting these kids. Your actions and official statements show this. As a parent of a child with severe disabilities, I can undoubtedly say that the policies of this board have gravely harmed a child like my daughter. They are targeted to a child like Annabelle. They are unfair and they trample her rights as a disabled individual. Give parents back the right to choose what's best for their kids. I'm proud for her for using her voice today. It will ultimately be the voice that holds this board accountable.
Thank you, Ms. Springer.
There's all of them.
So this concludes our public expression portion of the meeting. Is there anybody else who wished to address the board but did not have an opportunity? All right. I thank everybody for being here. We just genuinely appreciate hearing from all of you. It's 6:05, and we're going to take a 5-minute break before we dive into our action items. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to resume the meeting. And so we are going to begin with action item I. Superintendent.
Yes, consider approval of emergency connectivity fund proposal as heard earlier in superintendent report. My recommendation is to approve.
All right, additional questions or concerns? Motion to approve action item I, made by Ms. Hundley, seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Superintendent, action item J, sir.
Yes, consider approval of the U of L OVEC teacher residency program, specifically the job description as presented tonight.
All right, hold that thought. Any additional questions or comments, board members? So your recommendation, sir.
To approve.
Motion to approve, please. Made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor? And all those opposed? So that would be 3-2. The motion carries. Action item K, sir.
Consider approval of the student early graduation due to hardship request as presented.
Yes, any questions? All right, so your recommendation, sir?
To approve.
Motion to approve action item K, made by Ms. Hundley, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor? And that is 4, I got to count again. All those in favor, 4. Is there one in opposition? 4-1, Ms. Easton. Action item L, sir.
Consider approval of COVID plan and mitigation strategies.
And I'm going to ask you, Superintendent, to just share with us what your recommendation is for the record.
Sure. Given the next regular scheduled board meeting is not until February 28th, I recommend the board provide me the ability to make decisions about universal masking and other mitigation protocols should numbers within OC continue to trend down before the 28th as reviewed at tonight's meeting. If not, the Board of Education would review on the 28th and possibly take action.
Is there any additional discussion? Ms. Nykirk.
I really do believe that if we want to keep students in school.
Andrea, I'm not sure you're mic'd.
So I do want to keep students in school. That is a really pivotal thing for me. I want, students to be here because I think that learning does take place when they're at school with their teachers. I don't like the mask mandate, but I also understand part of it too. And so I guess I want maybe everybody to kind of think about, we want to keep students in school. We don't want to have to use NTI unless we really have to. And I guess that's really one of the things that I really wanted. And I do understand that it's a hardship for people, and I would never try to understand from family to family. But I do know that we've had our numbers regress in the last couple of years, and NTI was a portion of that. And so as much as I would hate to have to go back to that, I feel like that's something we need to do, is to keep kids in school by whatever means we need to, but we have to.
Thank you, Ms. Nykirk. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Dodson.
So what we're saying in this, and make it clear so everybody understands.
Use your mic.
It's what dead too. So what we're saying right here, if, say, next week the numbers dropped totally, we're giving the superintendent the authority to pull the mask mandate and make it optional instead of waiting until the 28th. Am I right on?
That's correct.
That's the recommendation.
So it could go a week, go 2 weeks, whatever, but we're giving you authority to do it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Kehoe.
So I have a question. Has there been any communication to the state regarding the last mandate we got 2 weeks ago about contact tracing and everything else?
Good question.
Are they going to continue to move forward if the numbers continue to go down with this mandate?
Any any information?
Is there any other school boards that are going maskless and challenging that as well?
Good question.
So a couple things. The Kentucky Department of Public Health released their guidelines that should you go mask recommended, they have, their protocols are to contact trace and quarantine, which then expands the circle to 6 feet. You would have to follow those things that we did have in place. I think if Mr. Keough, if I understand your question about, are there other districts considering about taking what steps they may take with recommendation if they went to mask optional or mask being recommended? I think all the superintendents I've talked to within our region and in other parts of the state, there are conversations. I'm aware of maybe some districts, none that are in our region, that have taken this kind of action. Certainly, I'm not saying that there aren't any, but there are some, certainly at this point, they're in discussion about what that would look like in terms of if you did go to a recommendation with universal masking, what would the other protocols be in place as outlined by the Kentucky Department of Public Health. I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Dodson.
Is there a way, that we could take and, right now might not be the time, to talk to them and say, hey, if we reach certain levels and mask is optional, would we have to contact trace? Get them to change the mandate to optional under certain conditions.
They're only, it's not a mandate, they're guidelines.
I will agree with that, but that's about keeping kids in school.
Board members, Ms. Hundley, would you like to make a comment?
I just feel like we can vote and do away with contact tracing and still have mask optional. We have that right and can do that for our district. And I mean, Dr. Radford already could technically do a district-wide by going school to school, because we've already given him that. And I feel like by saying that he can make district-wide decisions, that we've been elected to make these decisions and we're passing the buck to the superintendent.
Well, I disagree. And we've done this often. The superintendent makes a lot of decisions that we are not involved in. And if we take action to allow the superintendent to have that authority, we certainly have that right as a board. I was thinking about a medical model here, and you're not going to like this, but sorry? And so, I was thinking about when you go into a doctor's office and they say, well, I think you have blah, 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 and I'm going to give you these medications and I'm going to give you these medications, and I think you ought to use home oxygen, and I think you need to go to physical therapy, and then you go back 2 weeks later and there's no change, but he eliminates all of that. And it's not the best example, but I am in favor of peeling back our mitigation strategies one at a time so that we can know exactly what we're dealing with. And I would prefer that the superintendent make a decision to move forward with mask mandate by, say, Friday. We will have a lot more, we will have another week of data, and the numbers have trended down. We can look at what's happened in England, and they are 3 weeks ahead of us in the pandemic, sir, and they are 3 weeks ahead of us in terms of what Omicron has done in this country and in their country. And we have seen a downward trend for one day. And if we can continue to see that for a few more days, then I am comfortable with going back to a mask recommendation. And that's my position. So Superintendent, what's your recommendation?
So I think the reason I just share a brief information or thoughts based upon this conversation. The reason I ask or recommend to our board to give me the ability to make district-wide decisions is really from a school board perspective. Ms. Hundley mentioned about individual schools, and I think that's absolutely, the board did give me the ability to do that. From making decisions as a district, it is just part of process and procedure for the board, which is why I indicated or recommended that the board consider that, and so that would be what I would say moving forward that we do. And in addition to that, we would consider what's happening. As you've seen tonight, we had data that indicates that things are trending down and going down in terms of data within our schools. And so let's monitor that as we do every day, what happens for the rest of this week, and make that decision.
So my only concern.
Mr. Kehoe.
And we had spoke on the phone today, is the contact tracing. And if that doesn't change, that may influence your decision on continuing with the mask mandate. So that's why Suzanne and I feel that it should be left up to us instead of you being in your position of accountability. So
I understand.
Okay, Mr. Kehoe, then, would you suggest that we separate out these two items in the recommendation? The superintendent does now, as it stands, have authority to make a mask, for instance, a mask change school by school. And we saw from the data that the preschool had 0 cases. I would remove their masks as soon as possible. So we don't disagree on that. Same with our youngest learners. Would you be able to, is that what you're asking in your recommendation, Mr. Kehoe?
yeah, no, I'd rather the board had that decision.
All right, I can.
You mean district-wide, Patrick?
That's correct, district-wide.
So Superintendent, I would request that you separate those out into 2 action items.
So can you clarify that in terms of which 2 items?
Can anybody make a motion in terms of whether we ought to retain the same COVID-19 policy going forward for additional days?
I'd like to say something.
Mr. Dodson.
I don't want to make a motion for additional days, because if we say we're going to go 2 weeks and the numbers drop next week, we're going to be hung with the 2 weeks. That's the advantage of giving Dr. Radford the okay. If the numbers drop by the end of the week, he can make that recommendation. For us to come back, we'd have to have a special called board meeting. It's got to be posted for so long, and it's just going to delay the process.
Until we can get a quorum together.
Until we can get enough board members together to make that. And he has access to these numbers every day, quicker than any of us. And I trust his decision on this. I've talked to him a lot about it, and I trust his decision. And if it goes down by the end of the week, he can make that decision. Otherwise, we may have to wait a week or 2 till we have another meeting.
Ms. Hundley.
So when I hear you say the mask should come off of preschool, if we vote to continue the mask mandate tonight, then mask can't come off the preschool versus taking the mask mandate off and letting him make a decision school by school, because obviously with the numbers, some of the schools have a lower rate. So it's kind of a conflict of if we continue a mask mandate, that goes for everybody district-wide, versus letting him pick school by school and taking the mask mandate off and letting him determine school by school. Because if not, then the preschool can't take their mask off if we say district-wide we have to keep it, or keeping it.
good point. So,
I'm not saying district-wide. I'm saying
think Susan-
give him the authority to make the call with, he might want to make it district-wide.
I gotta ask you all to hold down your sidebars so we can conduct business.
But that does not take his authority away if he sees one school dropping so much of demasking at school or making that optional. But by giving them the authority to make one call across the district, if it fits the criteria, it can go quicker. It's all I'm saying. But he still has the authority to do it school by school on top of that.
So the policy as it stands still gives you the authority to do that being by school?
If you recall, when we discussed school-by-school decisions, that was when we were mask being recommended, and we would go school by school to ask schools to reinstate a universal masking just by individual school based upon those factors. So when we discussed that back in November, if my memory serves me correctly, that was the context that the lens that we looked through as a board, that we had that discussion and the board made that decision. So.
Yeah. So understand, I didn't mean to step on your thought, understand the complexity then of what you're asking, because I'm not opposed to the superintendent making that decision school by school, but then we are also talking about contact tracing and quarantining. And if we were to, let's use the preschool as an example. Are you here, my preschool principal? If we were to do that for the preschool, then we are maybe not obligated in your understanding of the Kentucky Department of Health recommendation, but what do we do about contact tracing and quarantines for the preschool?
Stop them. I mean, how many of the positive tests, going back to when it was just students that were contact tracing, the positivity rate of these kids that we said we were going to quarantine is so low, it doesn't make any sense to continue to do it. And the number of vaccinated kids that are getting COVID versus unvaccinated kids that are getting COVID are pretty much the same. So why are we saying unvaccinated kids have to do test to stay, but vaccinated kids don't have to do test to stay when they're transmitting, it seems like, and getting it at the same rate?
I would ask you to send us the data on that, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, because I know a lot of vaccinated people are getting the virus. I'm not sure the numbers are the same, Ms. Hundley.
Okay.
Superintendent, we've really muddied the waters, sir. You want to go back to your original recommendation and let me see if there's a motion to approve.
Okay.
Or you can amend your recommendation.
Can I ask one more question about
Sure.
the original? If we go back to the original recommendation, that doesn't take away his authority to do school by school, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Well, I'm backpedaling on that, Mr. Dodson, because as Dr. Radford said, that school-by-school option went hand in hand with contact tracing and quarantining. And right now, we don't have either one of those in place.
Well, I don't want to take that authority away from him, so can we amend it saying, yes, give you control, including, but not limited to, school by school? Does that make sense?
Mr. Dodson, say that one more time.
I don't mind you having the control to say, hey, the district is going to optional masking Friday. I have no problem with that. If this goes through like it is, we need to amend it to say you also, based on the numbers, can remove and make it optional school by school. Those two need to be combined, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm going to go way out of the norm in terms of meeting management and ask if any of our administrators would just like to share with us in terms of this whole issue. I think for me, the sticky wicket is quarantining. If we are working so hard to keep kids in school and that new Kentucky Department of Health recommendation has impacted that significantly, what happens in your building if we eliminate contact tracing and quarantining? I'm really asking our school administrators if anybody is willing to speak to that. Ms. Dant, welcome.
I'm not an expert on any of this, nor do I envy
I
your
just
position.
want some opinions.
Here's my opinion. The numbers have dropped significantly today as I'm watching them every day. It is a lot on our nursing staff who every day, I watch my receptionist and my nurse have to work together for multiple hours to figure out who's sick, who's been exposed, right? So I do think that we are quarantining kids. They're not getting sick. So if we're going to continue quarantining them, that's fine, but we as a district need some time to figure out who's going to do that job, because we can't ask our nurses and our receptionists or our attendance clerks to do anything else. It is a full day for them to do what they're doing right now with the numbers are as they are, right?
Just with positive cases you're talking about, Ms.
Yes, with managing the positive cases. I'm also completely comfortable with no more contact tracing, no more quarantining, because from what I see, the kids aren't getting sick from it being exposed at school. Now, the new variant, highly contagious. Sometimes I might have 3 or 4 kids out. They have the masks on, they're still getting it then. And I just have to say this. You didn't ask me to speak of this, but you asked for some opinions. And so teaching a child to read in this mask is impossible. And our kindergartners and our first graders need to learn how to read. I'm sure you saw the data from last month. They are struggling. And if you want to come over, I'm doing intervention groups every day, and it's hard for me to teach a kid without pulling down my mask how to pronounce words. And so if you're going to consider taking them off the preschoolers, I beg of you to consider the kindergartners and first graders that I'm trying to teach how to read.
Well, and I said early learners, and I've heard you say this before, so I greatly appreciate you sharing that with all of us at the same time. And we would never do it just for certain grade levels, I don't believe. And so my question goes back to eliminating quarantining and contact tracing. What does that look like in your building?
It'll be fine. I mean, that's just my opinion. There might be, and I probably have colleagues who disagree with me. And I'm sure, but I guess I'm just not worried. I just want to have school. I just want to teach kids.
Any other administrators want to add to this discussion? Here he comes. Mr. Oldham County High School.
Oldham County seems to be represented very well at most of the board meetings.
Yes. Good evening, Andy.
So we had, 2,400 people last Friday at Oldham County High School in a losing effort to North. So, way to go Mustangs. We'll catch you back in the district tournament.
Go Mustangs.
No masks, and our students at high school, by and large, they're very cliquey. They spend a lot of time outside of school almost I look at my high schoolers, there's, 3 to 7 high schoolers that are at my house almost every single night. It's somewhat interchangeable. Not wearing masks, our kids, when you've got 385 parking spots, They carpool, they're riding to and from, that's probably 500-600 kids. So the exposures are there.
Yes.
And, by and large, they're working at employers, they're interacting with the general public most of the time. The elimination of contact tracing would allow us to be able to continue. Last week, for instance, at one point, I think we had 85, almost 90 cases. Had we had to contact trace with that, we would have had averaging probably 6 to 8 people out per incident. I mean, we would have easily been 600 to 800 kids.
Right.
We can't go back into a situation where we're, at least not anytime soon. Our kids are down for about 24 to 36 hours that are COVID positive. And for the most part, I'd say are 90+% coming back within that 5-day allowable window. My premise would be that the sick kid would stay home, and those that are healthy would come to school. And it would be, at this point, no different than any flu season. And again, I think much like Liz, I've probably got some colleagues that differ in their opinions, but I think we're excessively testing. I've got a colleague who tested their healthy child and is going to end up having to miss, no symptoms, but just super cautious, and is now going to have to miss the entire week again to stay home with a child that tested positive, and it's testing a healthy kid. I'm like, well, was she sick? No, we did test to stay, and so that's the piece where you got healthy kids that are by and large missing.
So I'm going to back you up a little bit on that, Mr. Moore. So that child is not an Oldham County student? Because if they tested negative, they would go to school.
Yeah, it's one of the 100 and some odd staff members that I've got, and they, because there was an exposure within their home, tested their kiddo, even though their kiddo was vaccinated and wouldn't have been subjected to a quarantine even if had a close contact, tested a kid and popped positive, has no symptoms, asymptomatic, we've got a lot of that. And again, I think if we do away with the masking, do away with the quarantines, the sick kids go home and get healthy and come back. And the COVID positive kids stay out the 5 days and do their due diligence and some of their responsibility there to mitigate. And the healthy kids stay at school. I think that's by and large the outcome, from my opinion. So
appreciate your opinion. Do I have any other staff members that would like to participate in this discussion? So, Superintendent, Ms. Corson, come on down. Ms. Corson, welcome.
Hello. And I'm not here to debate whether masks are effective, not effective, but what I will tell you, and when we're talking about the numbers going down, we're talking about our student numbers going down one day. We just recorded the highest number of cases in Kentucky again today. We are not on the decline, okay? We are still on the ascent. The point is that these guidelines have been put out by the Department of Health. They've been put out by the CDC. If you just say, I don't care because I don't think what I'm seeing is working, and someone dies, you'll have no defense. If one person catches it and dies, and the guidelines are there, ignoring the guidelines is not going to be good in a negligence case, okay? I'm not saying that to keep the masks on forever. I say once they tip over and start declining, then I think you have an argument to say, look, we know how this goes. We didn't have a bad experience at the peak. The cases are going down. We're going to take masks off. But I don't know how you argue to take masks off in violation of the public health recommendations while the cases are still going up.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Corson. I'm going to ask you to leave if you're going to insult a staff member. Okay. Officer Simpson, I really hate to do this, but we need to remain civil and respectful, and
I asked the question, can we have her replaced? How is that insulting of a member of this board? That's your opinion, that's not fact. I asked how we could have her replaced. Simple question. You took it as offensive. You did.
I did. Because I have the utmost respect for Ms. Corson, so let's just terminate this discussion. Thank you. Dr. Radford, let's go back to your initial recommendation, sir, or is there an amended recommendation, or what would you like to do, sir?
Yeah, I just would share with the board, the reason I made the recommendation was based upon what we would see over time. As you've heard tonight and what's been discussed, we saw a decrease today coming off the weekend compared to what we have seen last week. And I felt like the reason I made that recommendation that I made to the board was really based upon, let's give this a little bit more time to see how the data progresses within our school system and within the county. Because we're seeing certainly the highest number of 5-day average that we've seen as you look back at what's happening across the community. Certainly, and appreciate everyone's perspective. This is very challenging and this is not easy. And I don't think, as I've said to a few of our folks, whatever decisions we make tonight, we will not solve the pandemic tonight. That will not happen tonight. However, I will just remind, in terms of the conversations that we had, the action that the board took 2 weeks ago, that was so that we could be able to keep schools open, so students could come to school every day and our parents could go to work. We were in some issues of being able to maintain that happening. I know that mask is very divisive, and certainly we want to respect that. However, we do have some guidelines that we have to be mindful of. So that's the basis for my recommendation, because we need a little bit more time. Things are trending down. However, we're not there, as you saw tonight, in terms of what's happening in Oldham County and what's happening in our schools with the average number of cases, which is why I made the recommendation. We also have illustrated that we will take action. Our board will take action in terms of taking the masks off, and certainly we voted or took action 2 weeks ago to put them back on, which was not an easy decision, nothing that we ever take lightly. So that would be just some perspective I would share with our board.
Yeah, appreciate that, and I would ask that while we monitor those numbers on a daily basis, we reconsider our course of action by the end of the week. So you heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's 3-2, Ms. Easton. Ms. Hundley, will you please read the policy guiding executive session?
No, I don't have it.
Find it.
Is it on there?
It's on the agenda.
Sorry. Patrick, do you have it pulled up?
I'm not open.
Sorry.
That's okay.
You. At this time, I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss the following matters: 3 litigation matters pertaining to student injuries, 1 special education matter, 2 employment claims matters, and a Title IX complaint. The board needs to go into executive session pursuant to KRS 61.8101C to discuss litigation preparation, the public disclosure of which would jeopardize the board's position.
Thank you. So motion to go into executive session made by Ms. Hundley, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor? That's 5-0. We're recessed.